Before you watch this incredible story, like this video right now and subscribe to see more jaw-dropping moments of karma, justice, and unexpected consequences that will absolutely blow your mind. Don't miss a single second of what happens next. Asterisk. The most expensive restaurant in the city was packed with celebrities, politicians, and wealthy business owners. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting golden light across white tablecloths. The air smelled of expensive wine and perfectly prepared food. It was supposed to be a celebration. Celebrity chef Marcus Ashford had just won the prestigious Chef of the Year award, and he'd rented out the entire top floor of the Grandview restaurant to celebrate with his team and industry friends. Marcus was at the height of his career. His restaurants had Michelin stars. His cooking shows pulled in millions of viewers. He was the king of the culinary world, and he was completely and utterly insufferable about it. That evening, Marcus sat at the head table like a monarch on a throne. He'd spent the last 2 hours bragging about his accomplishments, insulting other chefs, and making cutting remarks about the waitstaff. Then, the waiter made a small mistake. It was nothing serious. The waiter brought out a plate of appetizers 30 seconds behind schedule. Just 30 seconds late. 30 seconds in a night that was hours long. But Marcus Ashford stood up immediately, grabbed the plate, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, sending food and broken ceramic everywhere. "You incompetent fool," he screamed at the waiter. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The room fell silent. Everyone stared. This was extreme, even by celebrity chef standards. The young waiter, his name was David, and he was just trying to earn enough money to pay for his mother's medical bills, stood there humiliated and mortified. That's when something incredible happened. David stepped forward, looked Marcus directly in the eye, and slapped him across the face. Hard. The sound echoed through the entire restaurant like a gunshot. "Never speak to me that way again," David said quietly. But what happened next would teach Marcus Ashford the most expensive lesson of his life. A lesson that would cost him millions of dollars and destroy everything he'd worked for. To understand why this moment mattered so much, you need to know who these men really were. Marcus Ashford was 54 years old, and he'd been riding high for so long that he'd completely lost perspective about basic human decency. He'd grown up poor. His mother had worked as a maid in restaurants while Marcus was young. She'd sacrificed everything so he could attend cooking school. He'd escaped poverty through talent and hard work. But somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten where he came from. In the past 10 years, as his fame and fortune grew, Marcus had transformed from a grateful chef who respected his team into a tyrant who believed that success gave him the right to mistreat anyone beneath him. He'd become known in the industry as impossible to work with. His restaurant staff had a 90% turnover rate. People quit after weeks, unable to handle his verbal abuse and impossible demands. But Marcus didn't care. In his mind, genius came with the right to be cruel. Great chefs were temperamental. Great chefs demanded perfection. Great chefs could treat people however they wanted because their talent was more important than basic human respect. Or so he believed. David Morrison was 26 years old, and he was nothing like the waiters Marcus usually employed. David wasn't working as a waiter because he wanted to be in the restaurant industry. He was working as a waiter because his mother, Patricia Morrison, was dying of cancer. Her medical bills had completely drained their family's savings, and David needed money to pay for her treatment. Patricia Morrison was not just any woman. She was Dr. Patricia Morrison. She'd been a brilliant physician. She'd spent 35 years working in emergency rooms, saving lives, treating patients with compassion and dignity. She'd taught her son that respect for human beings was the most important value a person could have. Even when she was dying, Patricia would tell David, "Treat every person the way you'd want to be treated. Never forget that every person has a story. Every person deserves respect." David took that lesson seriously. Every day at work, even when customers were rude or demanding, David maintained his dignity and kindness. He treated every person with respect because his mother had taught him that this was how you lived a good life. The setting asterisk the Grandview restaurant's top floor. An exclusive private event. High ceilings, expensive furnishings, cameras everywhere. About 80 people in attendance, all of them from the food industry or entertainment world. Most of them were filming the event on their phones. The conflict asterisk Marcus Ashford had been slowly building to this moment all evening. He'd been drinking, getting more arrogant with each glass of wine. He'd made cutting remarks to other chefs about their restaurants closing down. He'd mocked the restaurant's management for not being able to meet his standards. He'd criticized every dish that came out, even though the food was being prepared by some of the best chefs in the city. He was looking for someone to hurt. And when David brought out the appetizers 30 seconds late, Marcus saw his opportunity. The stakes asterisk, what Marcus didn't know was that almost everyone in that restaurant had filmed what he'd done. They'd recorded him throwing the plate. They'd recorded his verbal abuse. They'd recorded his complete loss of control. And they'd recorded David's response. The moment when a young man, who was working through personal tragedy to help his dying mother, decided that he was not going to accept disrespect from anyone, no matter how famous they were. The seconds after David slapped Marcus were absolutely frozen in time. Marcus stood there, his hand to his cheek, his face turning red with rage. He looked like he might have a heart attack right there on the spot. His guests sat in stunned silence. Nobody had ever challenged Marcus before. Nobody had ever dared. "You're fired," Marcus screamed. "You're fired. You'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure of it. Your career is over." His voice was shaking with fury. Veins stood out on his neck. He looked like a man who'd been given the ultimate insult. "I don't care," David said quietly, already unbuttoning his vest uniform. "I'm quitting anyway." He turned to address the entire room. For anyone here who doesn't know, this man treats every person who works for him like they're beneath him. I've heard stories from his kitchen staff about him throwing things, screaming, making people feel worthless. He does this because he thinks his talent gives him the right to be a bully. David's voice was steady. He wasn't angry or vindictive. He was just speaking the truth. "I work here because my mother is sick and I need money for her medical treatment. My mother taught me that respect for human beings is more important than any job. So I'm not going to stand here and accept abuse from anyone, no matter how famous they are." He looked directly at Marcus. David's voice was steady. He wasn't angry or vindictive. He was just speaking the truth. "I work here because my mother is sick and I need money for her medical treatment. My mother taught me that respect for human beings is more important than any job. So I'm not going to stand here and accept abuse from anyone, no matter how famous they are." He looked directly at Marcus. "You're a bully, Mr. Ashford. And bullies only understand one language: consequences." Avid walked out of the restaurant with his head held high. The room erupted. People started talking loudly. Some were defending Marcus. Most were criticizing him. The energy had completely shifted from celebration to controversy in less than a minute. Marcus tried to regain control of the evening. He made jokes, trying to laugh it off. "That's what happens when you hire amateurs," he said, attempting to restore his image. But his voice was strained. He could feel the room turning against him. By the end of the evening, the celebration had turned into something else entirely, a moment of reckoning. But the real consequences were just beginning. That night, the videos started spreading on social media. First, they hit Twitter, then Instagram, then TikTok. Within 3 hours, millions of people had watched video clips of Marcus Ashford throwing a plate and verbally abusing a young waiter, followed by the waiter slapping him and calmly explaining why he didn't have to accept that treatment. The internet had opinions, and they were not kind to Marcus. #MarcusAshfordBully started trending within hours. Videos were being shared with captions like, "Celebrity chef gets what he deserves," and "Finally someone stands up to abuse." But things got worse when David's story started spreading. A journalist saw the videos and decided to research the waiter. She found out about David's mother. She interviewed David about his life, his struggles, his mother's illness. She told the story of a young man working as a waiter to pay for his dying mother's cancer treatment, while a wealthy celebrity chef screamed at him for being 30 seconds late. The narrative completely flipped. Now David wasn't just a waiter who'd slapped a chef. He was a hero, a young man standing up to abuse, a person maintaining his dignity and his mother's values despite incredible personal hardship. The public turned on Marcus with a fury. Restaurants that had been considering collaborating with him canceled their plans. Television networks that had been negotiating to renew his cooking show decided to pass. Sponsors and brands that had attached themselves to his name started quietly backing away. His Instagram followers began unfollowing him by the thousands. But the most devastating blow came from the restaurant industry itself. Other chefs began speaking publicly about their experiences with Marcus. They told stories of his abuse. They described the toxic environment he'd created. They revealed that his success wasn't just because of his talent. It was also because he'd stolen recipes and cooking techniques from his staff, taking credit for their creativity. One chef, a woman named Rebecca Torres, gave an interview that received millions of views. Marcus Ashford built his career by standing on the backs of talented people. He humiliated us. He stole our ideas. He made us feel worthless. That slap? That's the sound of years of abuse finally meeting consequences. And I'm glad it happened. The narrative had completely inverted. Now Marcus wasn't a victim of disrespect. He was a bully who'd finally been confronted. Then came the economic consequences. The Grandview restaurant announced that they would no longer be hosting Marcus Ashford's private events. 3 of his 5 restaurants saw a wave of cancellations as customers stopped making reservations. His merchandise sales dropped by 60% in a single week. But the biggest blow came when his streaming service announced that they were canceling his cooking show effective immediately. The press release was brutal. Following recent events and ongoing reports of workplace abuse, we have decided to discontinue Marcus Ashford's cooking program. The values of respect and dignity are fundamental to our platform, and we cannot continue to associate with individuals who do not embody those values. Marcus tried to do damage control. He released a statement apologizing for his momentary lapse in judgment. He said he was undergoing therapy to work on his anger management. He tried to spin it as a learning experience. But it was too late. His empire was crumbling, and he was watching it happen in real time. A week after the incident, Marcus Ashford sat down for what he thought would be a sympathetic interview with a major news network. He was hoping to rehabilitate his image. Instead, the interviewer had done her homework. She had prepared something else entirely. The interview began normally enough, with Marcus apologizing and talking about his commitment to change. But then the interviewer said something that stopped him cold. Before we continue, I want to introduce you to someone. David Morrison walked onto the set. Marcus went pale. He looked like he might get up and leave, but the interviewer had boxed him in. The cameras were rolling. Millions of people were watching. "David, thank you for being here," the interviewer said. "Can you tell the audience about your mother?" David spoke about Patricia Morrison with love and respect. He talked about her career as a physician. He talked about her illness. He talked about her values, the lessons she'd taught him about treating every person with dignity. As David spoke, you could see Marcus Ashford literally shrinking in his chair. "My mother is in the hospital right now," David said. "She's very ill. But you know what she told me about the incident with Mr. Ashford? She told me she was proud of me for standing up for myself. She said that respecting yourself means not accepting disrespect from anyone, no matter who they are." Then the interviewer asked David a question that changed everything. "After everything that happened, after all this publicity, what do you want now?" David paused. He looked directly at Marcus. "I want my mother to get better," he said simply. "That's all I want." The interviewer turned to Marcus. "Mr. Ashford, your net worth is approximately $120 million. Your mother's cancer treatment is expensive. What are you going to do about that?" The room fell silent. Marcus knew exactly what this was. This was a test. This was a moment where he could either prove that he'd learned something or prove that he was completely irredeemable. He looked at David. He looked at the camera. He looked at the interviewer. And then he did something unexpected. He started crying. It wasn't manipulative crying. It wasn't fake. It was genuine. Real tears streaming down his face as he confronted what he'd become. "I've been a terrible person," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I've treated people like they weren't human. I've abused my power. I've used my talent as an excuse to hurt people. And I did it all because I was afraid." He paused, struggling with his emotions. "When I was young, my mother worked so hard to give me opportunities. She sacrificed everything. And instead of being grateful for that, instead of using my success to help people, I used it to hurt people. I forgot where I came from." He looked at David directly. "Your mother is sick because she spent her life helping people. My mother worked so hard to give me opportunities, and I've wasted it on arrogance and cruelty. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm asking for it anyway." Then Marcus did something that shocked everyone. "I'm going to pay for your mother's treatment. All of it, whatever it costs. And I'm going to set up a foundation in my mother's name that will help medical professionals whose families are experiencing financial hardship due to illness." The room erupted in gasps. But Marcus wasn't finished. "And I'm going to do something else," he continued. "I'm shutting down all 5 of my restaurants. Effective immediately. I'm canceling my entire menu. I'm canceling my brand. I'm going to take time to actually become a better person before I ever open another restaurant." The interviewer looked stunned. "You're shutting down all 5 restaurants?" "Yes," Marcus said. "My restaurants represent my ego. They represent my arrogance. They represent everything that's wrong with me. I'm not going to let those places exist as monuments to my narcissism while I work on becoming a decent human being." David Morrison's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry for how I treated you," Marcus said, looking directly at him. "I'm sorry for humiliating you. I'm sorry for screaming at you. And I'm incredibly grateful that you slapped sense into me." 6 months later, something remarkable had happened. Patricia Morrison, David's mother, had undergone successful treatment for her cancer. She was in remission. She was going to live. David had left his waiter job and was now working full-time at the Marcus Ashford Foundation for Medical Professional Support. The foundation had already helped 147 families whose loved ones were healthcare workers struggling with medical expenses. Marcus Ashford had disappeared from public life. He was in therapy. He was working through his trauma and his arrogance. He spent his days doing volunteer work, helping at soup kitchens, working with at-risk youth. He had given away most of his fortune. He was living in a modest apartment. He had truly transformed his life. His 5 restaurants remained closed. Not shuttered as a business decision, but closed as a statement, a reminder that arrogance and cruelty have consequences. The restaurant buildings now housed community centers and education programs. But the most interesting thing happened 6 months after everything occurred. Marcus received a letter from David. In the letter, David told him about his mother's recovery. He thanked Marcus for his help. But most importantly, he wrote something that captured the entire journey. "My mother taught me that respect for human beings is the foundation of a good life. When I slapped you, I wasn't trying to destroy you. I was trying to wake you up. I'm glad it worked. I'm glad you're becoming the person you could have been all along. Welcome back to humanity." The real moral asterisk. There are several lessons in this story, and they all matter deeply. First, asterisk: talent does not give you the right to treat people poorly. Whether you're a celebrity chef or a CEO or a powerful person of any kind, your success is built on the backs of people who support you. Respecting those people isn't optional. It's fundamental to being a decent human being. Second, asterisk: sometimes people need to face consequences to understand what they've done wrong. Marcus Ashford had spent decades getting away with abuse because he was powerful and talented. It took a young waiter with nothing to lose to finally make him confront his behavior. Sometimes justice requires someone brave enough to say, "No, I will not accept this." Third, asterisk: the most important thing in life is how you treat other people. David Morrison's mother was a wealthy physician, but she spent her life caring for people with no money. She was successful in ways that matter, ways that actually improve the world. Marcus Ashford had money and fame, but he was poor in the ways that actually matter: compassion, respect, humility. Fourth, asterisk: it's never too late to change. Marcus Ashford was 54 years old, set in his ways, convinced of his own superiority. But when faced with real consequences, when forced to confront his behavior, he chose to transform himself. That choice is always available to us. The universal lesson: asterisk. The slap heard around the world was more than just a physical reaction to disrespect. It was a moment of cosmic correction. A moment when the universe or fate or justice or whatever you believe in decided that enough was enough. A young man serving appetizers had more dignity than a celebrity chef. And when that truth was revealed, everything changed. This story teaches us that respect cannot be demanded based on title or wealth or talent. It can only be earned through how you treat other people. And when you lose that respect, when you abuse your power, there will come a moment of reckoning. Sometimes that moment is a slap across the face. Sometimes it's consequences you never saw coming. But it always comes. The most beautiful part of this story is that it didn't end in punishment and pain. It ended in transformation and redemption. Marcus Ashford learned the lesson. He changed his life. He used his power and his wealth to help people instead of hurt them. And in doing so, he found something far more valuable than fame or money. He found his humanity. For everyone watching this story, whether you're powerful or powerless, famous or unknown, wealthy or struggling, remember this: the way you treat people matters. It matters more than anything else. It matters more than your talent. It matters more than your success. It matters more than your ego. Treat people with respect. Treat people with kindness. And if you ever find yourself losing that perspective, remember David Morrison and Marcus Ashford. Remember that someone brave enough will eventually call you out. And remember that your response to that moment will define who you really are. Did this story inspire you? Did it show you the power of standing up for yourself, while also showing the possibility of genuine transformation? Smash that like button right now and hit subscribe, because these stories prove that karma, justice, and redemption are all real. Stories like this remind us why respect, dignity, and standing up for what's right matter so much. You absolutely don't want to miss the next story where someone unexpected teaches a powerful lesson to someone who thought they were untouchable. Subscribe right now, hit the notification bell, and let's keep sharing these incredible stories together. Flexed biceps sparkles fork and knife with plate, ***.